with Kieran Gilbert.
Good morning and welcome to the program. First to this story, front page of the Australian today, that the major energy company, Energy Australia, could close its Mount Piper power station in the central west of New South Wales, and in the process, New South Wales could lose 15% of its electricity supply if it shuts down. Let's go to the Energy Minister. He's with me in the Canberra studio now. Minister, what do you know about this? Have you been briefed on it? And how real is this threat because of the coal supply to that particular power station?
Well, I have spoken to my New South Wales counterpart, the Energy Minister, Don Harwin, as well as the head of Energy Australia, Catherine Tanner, and we're all concerned about those recent developments around the Mount Piper mine, because we need to ensure sufficient coal supplies into the power station so that we can provide power to millions of people in New South Wales. So obviously the New South Wales government is very seized of this issue, so too is Energy Australia, and they are working through it methodically.
When you say you've spoken to them, is that this morning in the wake of Simon Benson's report?
No, I did speak to them prior to that yesterday and previously as well.
So what's the problem here? It's a Court of Appeal ruling against a judgment by the Land of Environment Court a number of years ago, but basically the company's saying it's a real threat. And this power station is scheduled to operate until at least the 2040s.
Well, there is a Springvale mine owned by Centennial Coal, and the question is, can it continue to produce the supplies that the power station at Mount Piper needs? Now, in the meantime, the report indicates in the paper today that Energy Australia is concerned about future coal supplies, so therefore there is a degree of rationing going on. Now, when that happens, you don't get the amount of power generation that you would otherwise on normal circumstances get.
But it also means they can't issue contracts of more than 2 years, so it affects certainty in terms of industry supply as well, doesn't it?
Look, it's a major issue. It's one that the New South Wales government is working through with Energy Australia, but quite clearly the Commonwealth stands together with Energy Australia and the New South Wales government in hoping to resolve this issue sooner than later.
Are you comfortable they've got appropriate powers, the New South Wales government, to override any decision to block coal supply to this power station?
They do have emergency powers, and I know that the Energy Minister is absolutely focused on what levers he has available, Kieran, in order to ensure continued coal supplies.
On the Liddell power station, the Prime Minister yesterday seemed to be suggesting that if AGL had another option, they'd be pursuing it, and he says the government's not aware of what their other option is. He doesn't think the company's aware. So what are we in right now? It's simply limbo, isn't it, in terms of the future of that power station in the Hunter Valley?
Well, let's go back to the context for this debate about Liddell. It's the AEMO report which made it very clear in its own words that time is of the essence to prevent a shortfall of 1,000 megawatts in power should Liddell close as scheduled in 2022. Bill Shorten, or Blackout Bill, says this is an issue for down the track. We take AEMO's words at face value and are working urgently to ensure there is no supply shortfall. That's why the Prime Minister had a 90-minute meeting with the head of AGL. It was a constructive discussion, and the 2 points that came out of that was that AGL would go to its board, or the Andy Vesey would go to its board with a request to either keep Liddell open for another 5 years or to sell to another party, and there will be interested parties out there in that asset.
The Deputy Prime Minister said there are two realistic options in terms of buyers. Is that your understanding, at least two?
Well, we've already seen a press release from Delta Electricity, which owns Vales Point, which has said that it's prepared to do due diligence on the asset. AGL have certainly not been public in saying the asset is now for sale. If that was to occur, then no doubt you would see parties announce that they were interested. But the other key point that came out of the meeting was that the company wanted 90 days to work up a plan for new generation, dispatchable generation, that would come into the market were Liddell to close. Those are options that are obviously being worked through by the company, but the government will not stand by and allow a shortfall in the market of 1,000 megawatts to occur were Liddell to close.
You talk about the possible buyers. The company talks about the remediation costs necessary or the refurb costs, if you're going to keep it open for longer, of this decades-old facility. and the AGL statement that we saw this week suggesting that the blackouts in part in New South Wales were caused because of failures at this power station. Is this really the way that we should be running energy policy, by propping up a 50-year-old power station?
Well, existing coal does have a lot of life in it. The reality is we have 16 coal-fired power stations and the average age is under 30 years. In the case of Liddell, it is an older power station, but with the right investments, it can go for longer. And our argument has been that if AGL thinks it's a worthless asset, then put it on the market and test the response from other competitors. That's a key point of our argument. We'd like to see continuous baseload dispatchable power provided into the market, and obviously in the absence of an alternative plan, keeping Liddell open does make sense. Yesterday,
the former Prime Minister Tony Abbott said that a clean energy target should not be bolted on top of the renewable energy target. He's apparently got a fair bit of support from your colleagues. What's your view on the points made by Mr Abbott in relation to that Finkel recommendation, the 50th one, which is yet to be implemented?
Well, as you know, the Finkel report had 50 recommendations and 49 of them have been quickly accepted.
The big one hasn't.
But there were a number of significant ones in those recommendations, including notice of closure requirements, including that wind and solar provide their own storage.
This is the big one about certainty for industry.
And this is a significant, substantial aspect of the report, which we are giving due consideration. But as the Prime Minister told the Parliament yesterday, Kieran, we have to get energy policy right this time, because we know our political opponents, the Labor Party, have had the CPRS.
But just on the Abbott comments.
But they've had the ETS, they've had the EIS, they've had the carbon tax, they've had every boondoggle.
Well, arguably, you shouldn't have got rid of the carbon price, because that was a mechanism. That was an investment signal to the market. That's what they want. That's what they're calling for.
Well, when we got rid of the carbon tax, we saw the single biggest drop in electricity prices ever
doubled
recorded.
since.
No, it hasn't. We saw the single, but this is where Labor needs to be held to account. When they were in government, electricity prices increased by 100%. 100%. What we've seen under our government is some increases in the generation component for lots of different
blackouts.
Go and talk to Jay Weatherall.
All right, let me just ask you about the Abbott statement about not bolting on a CET on top of a renewable energy target. Do you agree with that proposition?
Look, I'm not going to debate those issues in relation to the clean energy target while we are working through the implications of that recommendation from Dr Finkel, which he saw as a mechanism to come from 2020, which is 3 years away.
How soon? We're not talking about years away. This has got to be weeks, doesn't it? You'd have to be close to finishing your deliberations, wouldn't you?
Good try, Kieran. I mean, again,
the Prime Minister said before Christmas.
Well, obviously we would like to work through this issue as soon as possible. We have to get it right, and in the meantime, the Labor Party says there's not a lot of investment going on. I can tell you there's a record level of investment going in new generation, particularly renewables. That's $7 billion worth of investments underway, 4,000 megawatts of supply into the market. But what we need to do is get that right.
Yeah, the right mix.
The right mix.
Are you still fully committed to meeting the Paris reduction target?
Sure, absolutely.
If you don't have a clean energy target, you'll need another model to get there, won't you?
Well, the electricity sector is 1/3 of emissions, and we have seen emissions come down in the electricity sector in recent quarters. But clearly you need a whole of economy approach to reduce emissions, but we're not going to reduce emissions at the expense of the affordability and the reliability of the system. We believe we can meet all three objectives simultaneously. That's what we're trying to do. But the Labor Party, with their 45% emissions reduction target and blackout bill and brownout Butler, are only a recipe for higher prices and less stable.
The recent projections from Endeavour Environmental have overall emissions going up, and it's not because of electricity, actually. It's because of those other sectors that you referred to: industrial, transport, agriculture. How do you manage that?
Well, if cows are going to belch a bit more, as they have done because we've increased the size of the herd after the drought, then that is a price that we have to pay. If the economy is growing and as a result,
You've got to
there's
find
more
out,
investments in
find
industry.
other reductions, don't you?
But that's right, and that's where the Emissions Reduction Fund, which Labor has opposed, has been very significant. That is where the Renewable Energy Target has played its role. That is where we've obviously looked for other forms of low-cost abatement, including phasing out HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, out of the economy, which have been very significant.
Is there another option to give the mechanism that the industry needs in terms of, well, not a clean energy target, maybe a reliable energy target, a base load target, something that's going to be more palatable to your constituents within your party room?
You keep putting that rod out into the water hoping it will catch a fish, but today it's not going to.
Why not?
Well, Kieran, obviously, there's a lot of...
It sounds like that's where you're heading.
No, I'm just saying there's a lot at stake here in terms of billions of dollars worth of investment, household power bills, and our competitive position globally.
And your political position too.
Well, obviously you have to work out a policy that meets that trilemma of affordability, reliability and emissions reduction. At the end of the day, good policy is good politics.
Minister, thanks as always.
Good to be